Hickory?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Prior to the public hearing this evening on the city manager's recommended fiscal year 2013 or 12-13 budget ordinance, I'd like to present that budget to the city council and to the community. This was put online about 2 weeks ago when we called for the public hearing, and it's been available to the public, both online and in our libraries. Although this is technically the city manager's recommended budget, we can't go through this without giving proper recognition and gratitude to the people who work for the city that are instrumental in putting this plan together. Karen, who just came forward, Karen Hurley, the city's budget analyst, does a great amount of work and puts all the numbers together. She works in conjunction with a number of staff members in various departments of the city. Of course, the department heads are instrumental in working with myself and Mr. Wood, who's going to be part of this presentation as well. So it's really although it's the city manager's recommended budget, it's really a great team effort to bring you this spending plan this evening. So the recommended budget totals just shy of $94.79 million. And I wanted to spend a few minutes just kind of explaining how that number is made up. You see that box there, the operating funds, or the general fund, not 45, just a little $45.8 million. The general fund is where property tax, sales tax, the other general sources of revenue, those two being the primary and the largest, come in. And your basic operations of the city are funded there. That's where your police and fire department, planning department, parks and rec, etc., are funded from there. State and federal requirements require us to account for the city's utility system in a separate fund, and there you have the water and sewer fund. And it is completely supported by the sale of water and sewer services, both to our residents, businesses within the city limits of the city of Hickory, as well as the wholesale customers that we have primarily for water, that being our neighboring cities, counties. Actually, all of our neighboring counties also purchase water from the city. And so that $22.4 million is the expenditures as well as the revenues. All of those funds have to balance by law. The sludge composting fund is almost a sister fund, if you will, to the water and sewer. That's the ultimate disposition of the wastewater, and that's also a partnership with Hickory County and the city of Conover. And the $1.6 million is the city of Hickory's contribution to that fund. And of course, we are the largest contributor, the largest user. Stormwater recently, in the last few years, has been pulled out to account for separately as required by state law. These are some of the activities, most of the activities that are involved in keeping our streets clean. The street sweepers, for example, all things that we do as a city to try to preserve the water as literally as rainwater, stormwater falls and runs into the rainwater collection system and ultimately ends up in our lakes and streams. The transportation fund, the lion's share there is the airport. We'll talk in a little bit more detail about some changes at the airport that are reflected in this budget, as well as the city's contribution to the Greenway Transit Authority, our bus system as it's commonly referred to. And then our solid waste fund, almost $5 million, accounts for both the collection and the disposition of waste. So that also includes the tipping fees that the city residents pay passing through in their monthly bills through the city of Hickory to the county, at the county landfill. Now, so really the operations of the city, all those that I just mentioned, account for a total $77.5 million. Now over here to the right, this little box that says internal service funds. Governmental accounting laws require that we basically double count some of the expenditures that take place within the city. So the capital reserve fund, fleet maintenance fund, and insurance fund are funded in effect by transfers from all the other operating funds. But they have to be accounted for that way. That's $17.2 million, so that gives you your total of $94.7 million. in the total recommended budget. So some of the highlights in that budget, of course, the property tax I'm recommending remain the same at 50 cents. It's kind of a little bit of a good news, bad news budget this year. The good news is that we're not losing revenue anymore. The bad news is that it's not really growing either. Our tax base actually declined a little bit, although you see that our tax revenues are projected to be up slightly, less than 1%. And that's because of, we're anticipating some collections from previous years. So although we have a fairly high collection rate of 95, 96%, we are constantly collecting back taxes as well. So that really accounts for that small $68,000 increase in property tax revenue. The base is projected to actually remain flat. Other taxes, which is primarily sales tax, is projected to increase just a little bit, 1.4% there. I am recommending a 3% increase in our water and sewer rates, which would be consistent with the 2011 CPI. I thought it might be good to share a little bit of data about our water and sewer rates. In 5 years ago, fiscal year 2008-2009, the average residential user within the city of Hickory, which is 5,000 gallons of water a month, paid $44.91 in monthly bills to have their water and wastewater. 5 years later, 2012-13, that under the 3% recommended increase would go to 49.12. So you're talking about a $4.21 per month increase over that 5-year period of time. So roughly it's gone up about 84 cents a year over the last 5 years. You'll recall last year we did not have any increase. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the water and sewer fund, by law and by just good business practice, has to be self-supporting. So as we have had increases in our cost to process water, and many of the products that we use at the wastewater treatment plants are petroleum-based, and we all know what has happened over the last several years with the cost of petroleum fuel. It's just a good practice, and actually your policy that you adopted several years ago in a retreat out at the airport to annually evaluate cost of living, the cost of providing that service, and look at annual increases as opposed to going 5 or 6 years without any increase and then needing to hit the ratepayers with a double-digit or triple-digit increase. It also keeps you in good stead in maintaining this very capital-intensive system that you operate. So a next logical question would be, well, how do our rates compare to other systems in North Carolina? Every year we benchmark against the 33 systems in North Carolina that are comparable to Hickory in size. And at this proposed rate, the sewer system rates will put us number 28 out of the 33. Number 1 being the highest rate in the state, and number 33 being the lowest. So you can see there we're well into the bottom third in our sewer rates. The water system, and this is comparing the proposed rates to the other cities' current rates, so it doesn't take into account they're very likely increasing their rates this year as well. Same thing for the water system. 33 of the systems that we compare to, we are number 22. So both in the water and sewer arena, we are in the bottom third in terms of our rate. So that's kind of the benchmarking, but then if you just think about the market, the fact that the Apple Data Center uses City Hickory water found our rates to be extremely competitive as they were looking to locate and comparing all over the country. And I think Mr. Millar and the Economic Development Corporation's success with data centers who traditionally been large water users indicates that the market would reflect that our rates are very, very competitive, very favorable there. I'm also recommending a $1 per month increase in the monthly sanitation solid waste collection fee that our residents and businesses pay as well. So that will go from $13 to $14 per month. Obviously, I have to recommend to you a balanced budget. So when our revenues in the general fund are only going up slightly, that means that our expenditures are obviously only going to go up slightly too. So The general fund operating budget is looking at approximately 1% increase. All of the operating budgets in total are going to be about a 2% increase. Mr. Wood's going to talk in a few minutes, and I'm going to touch on it. He's going to elaborate a little bit more. But we've had a strategy that we've employed over the last several years of recognizing where we have the potential for some spikes in costs and being planful and setting aside funds to accommodate that. So about 3 years ago, at our recommendation of staff, the City Council saw fit to designate $1 million as a fuel reserve coming from your general your general fund balance. And we have dipped into that this year to some extent, a couple $100,000, and the 12-13 budget reflects drawing another $113,850 out of that reserve. So we still have more than half of that reserve remaining, but that has helped us balance the budget with these near $4 a gallon fuel spikes, although it's come down a little bit the last few months, and that's great. That's helped us. I want to combine those last two bullets up there. Again, following that strategy as we did with the fuel reserve, I'm recommending that we set aside $2.5 million that is currently in the city's general fund balance. It's undesignated, it's available to be allocated. To set that aside to fund the city's capital improvement program for the next 5 years. Now let me explain a little bit about what the CIP is and how that works. So I mentioned the involvement of all the department heads and their various staff members in preparing the budget. What happens is we meet, Mr. Wood primarily, and Ms. Hurley meet with the departments, and they look out at the capital needs each department's going to have for the next 5 years. Now, when I talk about capital needs, I'm not talking about new things. I'm talking about replacing roofs, replacing boilers, chillers. I'm talking about police vehicles that we need to replace. I'm talking about sanitation equipment, trucks, the rolling fleet that the city uses to provide services and maintain the city. And as we did that this year, we realized that the needs we were going to have in these capital accounts, these capital needs, were going to be more than we could project coming in from revenue. And so we thought it prudent to recommend that City Council take $2.5 million of your fund balance in the general fund and set it aside in the capital reserve fund to draw from over the next 5 years, as well as the annual appropriation you'll make into that account to make sure that the funds are there to take care of the rolling capital, the facility maintenance of your existing service level, and to provide for those needs throughout the department. That transfer of money is accounted for in the budget, and we feel like that's a prudent role for the city to take. Looking a little bit at some other expenditure highlights and putting the budget in a little bit of context, over the last 5 years, through some pretty aggressive things that we have done and the council has authorized staff to do, we've actually eliminated 37 or just over 5% of our workforce in terms of full-time positions. And that's at the same time that we added 17 full-time public safety positions. Mr. Wood's going to talk about the grant that funded a lot of that in the fire department in a minute. So those are, again, these are some of the strategies that have helped us recommend a balanced budget when we have very, very little revenue growth. We've had a hiring freeze in place since 2009, and I would categorize it as a soft freeze, meaning when someone leaves employment with the city, we don't automatically fill that position. There has to be a conversation that takes place between the department head and myself. And we have a lot of discussion about, is there any other way to provide that service? Can we contract it out? Can we consolidate some different things? What can we do to save money? That process has in large part led to the elimination of the 37 positions I talked about over the last 5 years. And currently we have 30 full-time positions that are frozen. So you combine the 37 with the 30, you have 67 positions that are frozen out of a workforce of 650. So you're looking at basically 10% reduction in our overall staffing costs there. You all know and authorized the city to offer a retirement incentive program, and that is currently underway. The budget doesn't recommend any new positions, but I want to clarify a little bit of a technical issue. When the city took over the operation of Fixed Base at the airport, which had gone into the company operating that, had gone into bankruptcy, and by direction of the bankruptcy court, the city was given stewardship of that operation. At that point in time, which I believe was in January, we came to City Council and you actually authorized the addition of 4 new full-time positions. So technically they're not new, they were added in January, but they are reflected in this budget for a full fiscal year. In terms of compensation for the workforce for the city, I'm recommending merit pay be granted. That's based on performance evaluations that all city coworkers go through this time of year in the spring, and they would go into effect October 1st, and they will average 2.25%. Mr. Wood's going to talk in a little bit more detail about some changes that we're making to our health insurance program to help our workforce become more healthy, more engaged in wellness, but also to hold down some costs. And as we have been doing for the last several years, we'll continue to focus on opportunities to reorganize, consolidate, ways to improve our services as well as hold down costs. And then kind of the last expenditure highlight, we want to talk a little bit about the long-term situation, and specifically about our debt. $4.3 million in general fund debt is extremely small for a city the size of Hickory. Our AA bond rating was just reaffirmed by Standard & Poor's. We're in great shape there. And of course, right now is a very favorable time to borrow, as most everybody knows, and that's demonstrated by the refinancing that we just went through. And I'll come back at the end of our presentation and talk about why this is an important point and a good position that you are in as a city council to look to the future. So the fiscal year 12-13 recommended budget is really just a snapshot in time. It's looking at the next 12 months starting with July 1st of 2012. But I'm going to ask the Assistant City Manager and the city's Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Wood, to come to the podium, and he's going to kind of look at the financial outlook going forward. I think one of the reasons we've been able to be successful is because we don't just look 1 year at a time. We look out 3, 4, 5 years and try to employ strategies that will keep us in good financial shape through that. So, Mr. Wood, if you want to grab this, come to the podium and take it from here.
All right, members of the City Council, Mr. Berry, Mr. Crone. Mick just detailed the annual budget, which will be a 12-month spending plan. And like you said, we started working on that budget in August. We started in August of 2011. And also at that time, we decided to take a look forward 3, 4, 5 years and look at the headwinds that we felt like we were going to be facing, and also with those headwinds, what kind of a plan could we put in place or strategy could we develop to get ahead of some of what we knew was coming. So this is really going beyond, to some degree, the FY 12-13 recommended budget and looking multiple years into the future. Probably the number one issue we continue to be concerned about is the level of building permitting activity. It's really at all-time lows. It's a third. It's half of what it was just a few years ago, and it's a third of really where it should be. Cities would like their tax base to grow at about 3% annually. If we could reach that, we'd probably be having a different discussion. But we haven't been reaching that. And really, for our tax base to grow at that rate, we really need to see our building permitting activity triple from where it is today. So we anticipate that, and that'll take a number of years to turn around. Hopefully, maybe it'll come sooner than we think, but it should be a gradual improvement over years. So with that in mind, we do anticipate continued slow growth in the property tax revenue. As Mr. Berry stated, we have seen it's been flat to declining the last 3 years. So we're going to go into the assumption over the next 3 years we're going to see the same sort of scenario, and any improvement will be a pleasant surprise. Limited sales tax growth. We anticipate, I think we saw 1.5% increase this year as incomes improve. sales tax revenue will improve. So those two things are directly in his job situation improves, sales tax revenue will improve. So we anticipate limited growth in the foreseeable future in the sales tax as well. When we talk about property tax makes up half of our general fund revenue. That's 23 million of a $45 million budget. Sales tax is about $6 million. So that's the next closest category in terms of a revenue. So you can see the importance we place on property tax revenue growth in terms of being able to fund expenditures. Investment earnings will continue to be low for the next few years, we anticipate. The SAFER grant, Mr. Berry mentioned the federal grant we got to add the additional ladder company at the fire department. This will be that's been tapering off the last 3 years. We'll get some more money in for those personnel this year, and then after this coming fiscal year, it'll go away. That'll be $500,000. That'll be 100% city responsibility. And again, that has been tapering. So that's something we will definitely have to plan for. There's a particular pot of state money. I won't go into great detail, but it's $400,000 in state revenue that the state gave us to replace other revenue they took away 10 years ago. And that it is anticipated that it will expire this year. There's some talk about trying to get that to be expanded for 2 more years. Hasn't been successful so far. I think you got an email about that this afternoon. So that's something, if that goes away, that'll be a $400,000 hole we'll have to fill on the revenue side. And really probably bigger than that even, I think there's an appetite in Raleigh to tackle the state tax and do some state tax reform. And what that will probably or could potentially mean to us is privilege licenses. Our privilege license revenue would be something that has been on the table and talked about in Raleigh in the past. And that revenue to us is $1.1 million, which is equivalent to 2.5 cents on your property tax rate if that goes away and we don't get a replacement for that. So that's something that we're going to be keeping a close eye on. And on the expenditure side, obviously, we've seen pressures with fuel, power, street lighting, and we've talked about the needs for additional funding for street resurfacing, and we've also seen an uptick in some of our insurance-related costs. So that's on the expenditure side. Putting all that, and I hate to paint a dismal picture, I'm trying to paint a realistic picture, and maybe things will turn out better than what I've got on the slides here, but we're entering our 5th year of this slow to no growth scenario. So we've done a lot of things. Mr. Berry mentioned the positions we've cut. So we recognize that it's time to get aggressive again and put a strategy together to get ahead of some of these things, and that's going to be the next slide, to get us through the next 3 to 5 years. And most of this has already been put in motion. This spring, you refinanced $16 million of the city's debt, both the general fund and the water and sewer fund. We refinanced at an average of about a 2% rate, so we got a very favorable rate, and that'll save about $700,000 over the life of all that debt. So that was the first thing that we did to try to offset some of these things. City Council approved the retirement incentives program. That's underway for employees, and again, that's just the cold truth about that is you take an employee who's eligible for retirement, and they retire, and you hire somebody in, not making the salary and the benefit package that the previous employee had. So that's a personnel savings. And just a little update on that. We had a target number in mind, what we would like to see, and we're at or exceeding where we thought in terms of folks taking us up on retirement incentives. So we feel pretty good from that perspective on that being a successful offering this time around. We did this 2 years ago, if you recall. As Nick mentioned, the hiring freeze will continue, and that's been since January of 2009. And only he can approve positions being filled. Taking the hiring freeze and the retirement incentives together, over the next few months, we're going to be looking at our vacancies and looking at how we might be able to reorganize departments, eliminate positions, provide the same service with fewer people. It will give us some opportunities where we would not have had otherwise. So that'll be something that we'll be looking at in the next few months after we get a clearer picture of folks that are going to take us up on the retirement incentives program. Compliance-based health insurance. This is something we're moving towards to control our health insurance costs. The simple explanation is, or discussion here is, if the city's going to provide folks with city-funded health insurance, we're going to ask our employees to take ownership of their health. And every year they have a health risk assessment done, and there's 8 or 9 things we test for. And if they're in a high category of some of these things, like, take for instance me, I have high cholesterol. The city's going to ask me over a period of time to work on bringing my cholesterol. I don't have to have perfect cholesterol in a year's time, but I have to have a certain percentage improvement over a year's time. And if I don't, then I'm going to start paying a premium towards my health insurance. We did something similar the previous fiscal year where we started charging tobacco users monthly premium $43 a month. So this is just we're calling it the next general operation of our wellness program and health insurance as a way to help control health insurance costs. It's been pretty well received by employees.
Yeah, maybe just to remind everybody, the city of Hickory pays 100% of our employees' health insurance, and we're pretty proud of the fact that we're one of the few local governments around that's still able to do that, and that's one of the reasons we're moving so aggressively with wellness, as Mr. Wood mentioned. We want to continue to try to maintain those costs so that we continue to provide that benefit to our employees.
And we've had real good success with our wellness program and controlling health insurance costs, and we need to get the next generation of that. Along those same lines, we've seen an increase in our workers' compensation costs. And so in the fall, we formed an executive safety committee to really go through the numbers, look at all the accidents, where our policies lax, where's enforcement lax, what can we do to tighten it up. And I've been real pleased with the results of that. This should be the first year in 3 or 4 years that we will be within budget with our workers' comp expenses. So that's seen some success, and we've got some key staff members, department heads, and some others participating in that. That's going real well. As Mick mentioned, funding our 5-year CIP, there's a blip that's coming up in the next really 3 to 4 years. Some things you don't ordinarily have. There's a bridge replacement, the lighting at the LP Prince Stadium, 2 fire trucks. So there's some things we wouldn't ordinarily have in that time frame that are coming up. So it only makes sense. The city's been very diligent about saving money, putting money in the bank for a rainy day. But on the capital side, it's going to be raining the next 3 years, so it only makes sense to tap into that to get us through that kind of expenditure on capital. And again, just to be abundantly clear, we're not talking about building new parks, new fire stations, new facilities. We're talking about replacing rolling stock, maintaining existing facilities, that sort of thing.
I have a question on that. If I'm reading it right on the page 183, 1.5 million is water plant for water tanks.
This 2.5 million is just for the general fund. That's
coming out of the water.
That's coming out of water and sewer. Yeah. And that's a good point. This 2.5 million is just for the water and sewer. It's just for the general fund, and those funds supported by the general fund, which will be airport and solid waste.
Some of this for the expenditures for the resurfacing of the different parking lots.
Yes.
With fuel and everything is going up, and I think I saw something like we need to budget twice as much, and this numbers that's kind of projected out on this are future numbers or now?
They are for the resurfacing. Those would be future numbers.
Okay.
So, but hopefully those were done based on $4 a gallon gas. I mean, in terms of petroleum costs. So it wasn't done based on assuming petroleum costs go even much higher. So but it was done on the high end. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
And one of the messages we're sending to City Council and the community, it's going to be difficult for us to expand or add services without additional revenue or allocating existing resources somewhere else. So 2 examples of that. Nick mentioned the fixed-based operations at the airport. Well, that's a self-funding endeavor that we were able to take on. It would have been very difficult, if not impossible, if that was not a self-funding endeavor. And an example of reallocating existing resources, we recently took an employee from the planning department and moved to code enforcement to help with the workload there. So that's just an example of reallocating additional resources or existing resources in the department. So that's the strategy we put together. Most of that's already in motion, and we should reap some savings. And analyzing the results, it's a balancing act, cutting or controlling costs too much to where you're hurting your service delivery, and we're very conscious of that. And we're involved in the North Carolina Performance Measurement Program, and they do an annual report that does monitor your performance and actually benchmarks you against other other municipalities across the state. So we'll be able to monitor, are we slipping in some service delivery areas? And that'll be something we just got a report in for the previous year that we'll be paying a lot of close attention to. Mr. Berry mentioned the S&P bond rating was recently reaffirmed. They do that every 2 years. We have a AA rating. They did it in 2011. They'll come back in 2013, and hopefully they will like what they see. That'll be another indication on the financial side that we've been able to maintain our financial position. Have we been able to maintain our employee health insurance costs through this next generation of wellness? That'll be very easy to measure. And overall personnel costs, have we been able to control those through retirement incentives, reorganizing departments, and controlling personnel costs in other ways? And again, with the Executive Safety Committee that we formed, we feel good about what we've seen so far in workers' comp costs. That'll be a very easy measurement to get a hold of in terms of what happens to our costs. And the 5-year capital replacement schedule, that'll be speak for itself in terms of the funding that's already been provided, so we should be able to meet our needs there over the next few years. So that's the plan we've put in place for the next 3 to 5 years. We felt like we needed to be fairly more aggressive than we might ordinarily be or have in the last couple of years, because we do see a few headwinds on the horizon that we're going to need to face in the near future. Just want to go to the next slide. And with that, I'll turn it over to
So that kind of all deals with the budget and the financial situation and the strategies for moving forward. I want to kind of close with an upbeat note. The good news is that these strategies that we have been employing the last few years have put you in a really good situation in terms of your minimum debt. You've got generally pretty good infrastructure out there, and you're well positioned to make sure, as Mr. Wood talked about, that your basic services are going to be provided over the next few years. And as we went out and met with coworkers and explained the budget, and I wanted to come up with some way to help them understand it. It's kind of a tale of two cities. On one hand, we're going to be constantly looking at where can we make reductions, where can we save in the operating budget, etc. But I think there's also going to be some important investments that we're going to need to make in the coming year and into the future. It kind of is the best of times and the worst of times to play on that a little bit more of the tale of two cities. I think there are some really good, big economic opportunities out there, economic development opportunities that you all are familiar with. I mean, we're committed to partnering with Catawba County and the city of Conover and the town of Maiden and the town of Catawba in a multi-jurisdictional business park. There are some things moving and happening on that, and that partnership is such that the city of Hickory would be about a 25% partner, meaning the infrastructure costs, etc. We would share 25% of those, but we would get 25% of the revenue back as industries locate there and grow. You all know of some other work that we're kind of early on in trying to identify other business park opportunities. So you're well positioned to be able to make those investments as we can identify revenue sources that will pay for them, especially if we're talking about incurring some debt. We heard this morning from the county manager that he feels like the county commissioners will be moving forward this month at their next meeting to approve the county landfill waiver. We think that in conjunction with the City of Hickory's vacant building grant will really help turn over some of these old obsolete manufacturing properties that we have all around the city. So we're excited about that. And just a week ago, City's Planning Director, Mr. Frazier, got great news from EPA that we have gotten another round of brownfield funding, $400,000 in grants. And just to remind folks what that means is we actually partner with the private sector, the owners of buildings, to have environmental assessments done so they know what they're dealing with. And that helps them make the decision as to how they would market and repurpose that facility, or does it need to come down. And so I want to congratulate Mr. Frazier on that. That's just been a great initiative for the city. So we're excited about that to help us out with redevelopment. Ms. Surratt, a meeting ago, talked about making Hickory more inspiring. And as as we went out and visited the other communities over the last 5 months, I think that was one of our takeaways, is it's a very competitive environment out there. You have to be able to provide new businesses with places to develop, like a business park, plus you have to be an attractive community. We are an attractive community. We have a lot of wonderful amenities, amazing amenities for a city our size. But I think one of the things we learned is it's competitive. You can't rest on your laurels. You've got to be making more investments. You've got to be an attractive place for people to come and things to do there. And then you've got to be able to tell that story. And we've really felt good about and are beginning to get traction and success with Hickory Life Well Crafted. There's lots of different initiatives that we'll be pursuing over the next year. Scott Millar at the EDC has piggybacked with us and coined Hickory Charlotte's Great Northwest. You see that in some of the advertising he does. That has been really well received. The Start Something Here initiative that we partnered with the Chamber and the hospitals in Catawba County and some of the other communities. There's a website that will continue to grow, and then makeithickory.com. There will be a series of campaigns and initiatives in conjunction with various events to just help continue to showcase the great quality of life that we have here in the city of Hickory. And maybe just to wrap up again on a positive note, just today saw an email from a gentleman that he sent to Mark Siemens with the Hickory Crawdads, saying that he'd come up from Charlotte yesterday or the day before for a baseball game at LP Friends Stadium, and he said it was the best minor league experience he had ever had, and just complimented the city and the team for just a great experience for him and his family. So sometimes I think we're always trying to look for the future. We're trying to look to do things more and better, and that's important, but we also have a lot of great things to offer, and sometimes it's people coming from out of town that help point that out to us. So at that point, I know it's a fairly lengthy presentation, but we wanted to make sure that we covered everything as thoroughly as we could, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have before we open the public hearing.
The $1.5 million at the water plant, it's coming out of the water sewer fund. It's a capital project,
Correct.
Our capital, what is that about? I mean, that's a big number over the next 5 years. I don't cost anything for
This specific project?
Yeah.
Which year are you looking at on that?
12, 13, page 183.
Oh, the tank.
Yeah.
It's a replacement of the main water tank that sits right there at the water plant.
Well, no, but I wanted to just wrap my head around it, what it was. I mean, that's the largest single line item that we're doing. That's going to be taking place over the next 5 years, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So what you see there is actually setting aside $1.5 million over the next 5 years to tackle.
Okay, so we won't see that coming out of
You
the
want to add something? It's for additional storage for water, it's water tanks.
Yeah.
It's not different tanks.
Oh, it's 5 new tanks.
The total 1 million gallons.
So right, 5 million.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I'll declare the public hearing open. I would remind folks that we try to keep each side 15 minutes, and we ask folks to divide their time up so that we stay within that framework. We remain committed that if anyone has something additional, relevant, that hasn't been said, and they want to say it, we want to hear it. We start with those who are opposed to the proposal. The proposal being to accept this budget. And then we move to people who are in favor of the proposal. And then we offer rebuttal by both sides of 5 minutes each. With that, I'll ask if there's anyone present who would like to speak against this budget, against this proposal. Is there anyone who'd like to speak in favor of this proposal? There being no one desiring to speak, I declare the public hearing closed and ask for motion or discussion.
On the approval, second.
Motion by Mrs. Patton, second by Mrs. Fox. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion's carried. As I do every year, I remind people, we just spent a lot of money, in effect. And it's our money, it's taxpayer money, it's because they're saying it's government money. And, and although it seems like we did it fairly quickly, we have spent a lot of time in meetings to go over this budget time and again to make sure that all council are fully informed as to what's in the budget.